Are you ready for this?
I hope so.
You were born ready for this, Max? You were, I believe.
Sure. I was, yeah.
Hello, Max Cohan, the lovely Max Cohan joining me today. Bleav in Bama episode 5. We are talking Alabama football, of course, LSU game, Ole Miss game, all of that. For our listeners, unfortunately, I am joined by Max today because my co-host DJ, he's feeling a little under the weather this week. So we get to be joined by one of my good friends who also covers the Alabama Crimson Tide. Max, he is another sports reporter here in the lovely state of Alabama. So Max, just tell a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to the people.
A little bit about myself. All right. Well, Olivia and I are normally enemies in terms of competition.
We are.
But I figured, I help her out since she's a good pal. How would I describe myself? Native New Yorker. Spent the first 21 years of my life in the great state of New York, the Empire State. And since then, I've been traveling around the country, attempting to cover sports. First in Idaho, now here in Alabama. So been an interesting couple of years. But, as a Mets fan living in Braves country, that's just another day in the life. Don't get excited about that, Olivia. No.
Come on, baby. We won't make this about that. We won't make it about that. But Max and I are mortal enemies on almost every front. But now you get to live here in Alabama, of course, covering the Alabama Crimson Tide that you get to do. Neither of us were actually at this game in Baton Rouge this past Saturday, but we go to a lot of the games, a lot of the home games throughout the year. I know I'm going to Ole Miss on Saturday. Is Nolan going to Ole Miss on Saturday? Question mark?
I wish I had the answer. I want to say that was the plan. I don't know if that is officially happening, but
Max doesn't know anything that's ever going on in his life. It's fine. So we get to work alongside each other, covering a lot of Alabama and Auburn football, of course, as well. But we are talking about the Alabama and Crimson Tide. Unfortunately, coming off a close, gut-wrenching overtime loss to the LSU Tigers. You were watching this game, of course, unfold like all of us, not in Tiger Stadium. And I always say, we get to see these games from such a cool perspective because we are normally down on the sidelines, but it is also kind of nice to just sit and watch the broadcast every once in a while because you see things a totally different way, you pick up on different things. So just watching the LSU game, what are some things I guess that just kind of stood out to you about Alabama on Saturday?
Well, as you were saying, when we're on the field, we have arguably the best seat in the house. But there are things that we just do not see. There are injuries that, guys that go on the sideline and don't come back on the field that we're just not alerted to. There are stats and records and all of that unless they're announcing in the stadium, we're not knowing anything about them. We don't have all of that information to us because we're holding a camera focused on the play at hand, not necessarily seeing everything else that's going on the field. There were a few things that stood out to me. And I think, when you look at the way things went, obviously, anytime Bryce throws for over 300 yards, you're thinking, all right, this is probably going to be an Alabama win. Mm-hmm. And he threw the ball 51 times. I'm looking at the stats. This isn't from memory, I will admit.
He is not that impressive.
No, but he threw the ball 51 times. He threw for over 300, and that's in a normal situation, an Alabama win. You're expecting that to be a win. On the other side, Jaden Daniels only threw the ball 32 times for 182 yards. Mm-hmm. Usually, if the Tide can keep somebody under 200 yards, not only is it a win, it's a dominant win. And clearly, there's something that is going on. I don't know if it's an LSU thing or if it's an Alabama thing that is breaking the mold of what's being expected out of this team. Now, Bryce Young, last year, unbelievable. Arguably one of the best seasons an Alabama quarterback has ever had. Obviously, the voters felt it was the best season that anybody had in college football last year. He comes away with the Heisman. Has he been great this year? Yes. Not quite as great as he was last year and not standing out from the pack as much as he was last year. The one thing I've noticed all season is even though Bryce has had moments where you're like, this guy is an unbelievable prospect, The wide receivers are not what they were last year.
Mm-hmm. Which I think, it's hard to say, oh, they're not what they were when you've got the guys that you were replacing.
Right.
But 100% with you.
I mean, you do not have a guy on this team this year that is that Jameson Williams type guy where you're going to let the ball fly 65 yards in the air and he's going to be on the other end.
You know he's going to be there to catch it.
Right. There isn't one of those guys. Now, that's nothing against Ja'Cory Brooks or none of these guys. It's just they're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama's still a great team. Are they a playoff team? No. And the LSU loss is the nail in the coffin for that one. This was the game that said, hey, if you had a thought that they were going to play in the SEC championship game and that they were going to make it in, here's your answer. No, they are not.
Because even if the weird circumstances that have to happen for Alabama to still get to the championship game, I don't even, and I hate all the hypotheticals and the what ifs or whatever, because there's so many of them, but I don't even think so it's Georgia in the East. If Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC, I still don't think they put the 2-loss Alabama over Georgia just because they lost in the SEC, because they'll arguably only have the 1 loss, assuming that Georgia doesn't lose before they get to Atlanta in December. And then who else? Ohio State and Michigan obviously have to butt heads. So whatever happens with that situation, Clemson out.
Tennessee, TCU, I would argue all of them have a better chance over Alabama right now. But again, the season's not over. Yeah. There's still time where things could change, but I don't see enough potential for change that squeezes Alabama in at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And especially obviously you said it and everyone else was too. The LSU game was kind of that deciding factor, but the Ole Miss game, obviously even more so, because going into Baton Rouge, Alabama didn't really have any room for error. But now they really do not. And I think most Alabama fans, most of my friends that went to Alabama, they're very dramatic as well. And they're like, oh my God, the everything is over, everything's ruined. And I'm like, calm down. Yes, the odds of Alabama making the playoff, very slim. And I think most people understand that that's a reality at this point. You don't want to tell any of the guys on that team that, because obviously, that's what they're chasing. That's what their standard is, whether it's necessarily a realistic standard at this point in the season. That's what they're going for. But, going into this Ole Miss game, there is certainly no room for error. At least coming out of the LSU game, there's some weird circumstance where LSU loses to whoever, we beat Ole Miss and all of that kind of stuff just to get to Atlanta. But now with that loss to LSU, absolutely not. Cannot happen. And we'll get to Ole Miss a little bit more just in a second. But we haven't really talked extensively about this. I want to know your thoughts about Brian Kelly going for the 2 points in overtime, because I'm sitting on the couch and I said, I don't think he's that guy. I look at Brian Kelly and I think the long years that he had at Notre Dame really implements this to me. But I look at Brian Kelly like I look at Nick Saban. I look at him as a very old school, traditional, let's get the point that we know that we need to send it to keep overtime going or double overtime or whatever. I was not expecting him to even go for it, and incredible props to them for executing it as well as they did. But I've been picking everyone's brain this week on just that decision as a whole, because you always see those decisions and we talk about it all the time where it's if they get the 2 points, it's of course the right decision. But if they were to have missed it, everyone in Baton Rouge would have been talking about that decision for the next 365 days.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I think of him, I still think of him as the leader of the Fighting Irish. And during the entire time he was there, they were always a team that seemed like they had what it took. And then they'd get to these big games and they'd lose. And we'd never seen an opportunity for them to do something like this before. And I think that's what it is. The expectation is that he wouldn't do it because he hadn't done it, but that's because he hadn't been in this situation before. And I feel like there were a lot of people who were super critical. As soon as he came in, he did that fake accent and people were like, I don't know if this was the right hire. And I think for him, this was a statement saying, not only am I here to win, I'm here to do it, and I'm willing to take the risks. Did I expect him to do that? Absolutely not. At the same time, I think he knew if it's going to come down to doing the 2-point conversions round after round after round, there's a chance that they win this game. And so if there's a chance that they win this game, why not just try and end it right now? Was it a risky play? Absolutely. Alabama could have won that game with a better tackle, but it worked and the Tigers won. And now who knows what happens from here?
Well, and it's the way you worded that, I think, is so funny. The Alabama could have won with a better tackle, but Brian Kelly could clearly see that Alabama could barely tackle them when they needed to all game long. Like they had, and I was like thinking about this, before we got on the call, Alabama's defense didn't play terribly. I think they had like 6 sacks or something like that. But in the moments where they needed to stop Jaden Daniels, they could not do it. Like it was like those, it kind of what we say about Bryce Young all the time is like, another team's defense, well, LSU's defense, for example, they played well all game long, but the Houdini act that Bryce pulled off to get that touchdown in the 4th quarter in the first place, those are the key plays that make the difference in this game. And obviously, that's what happens when you're going up against a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, a great quarterback like Jaden Daniels and that kind of stuff. But, they couldn't stop that LSU offense when they needed to, and clearly going for 2 in overtime, that's when you need to stop. So I guess Brian Kelly's just in his head. He's like, well, you know what? They haven't been able to do it yet, so we might as well go for it now, because I don't know if I want to keep going into overtime with Bryce Young specifically. After what we saw in the Iron Bowl last season, I get like heart palpitations just thinking about it. I get like nervous, like sweaty. But I don't know if you want to go against it. So but to your point, if you think that you have the possibility to win it, I guess let's just go ahead and win it now and see what happens. Yeah. So Alabama now once again hitting the road to another tough SEC road environment. I don't think there's any necessarily environment in the SEC where it's not difficult to play on the road. Maybe Vanderbilt, but we were
no disrespect to the Commodores.
Never disrespect to the Commodores. I wouldn't want to play a baseball game there. I sure would not.
No, you would not.
Maybe the football games are a little more polite than Tiger Stadium and the Grove in Oxford. Alabama now, though, again, going on the road, going to Oxford to face off against Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin, which is, of course, always a hot topic of conversation whenever Alabama and Ole Miss meet up, now that we've got the Lane train riding and rolling through Oxford.
Yes.
I think one of the best things that I've seen this week, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, Lane saying, that he was texting Feinbaum on the way to his press conference the other day. And he's like, can you shut up about Alabama's dynasty being over? Like they have to come play me. And that does not bode well for me, because we've seen this time and time again, specifically when I was in school at Alabama, when Ole Miss came to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. That's what everyone said. Oh, the Alabama dynasty is over and all this stuff. And Lane is like, I am not dealing with that. Please stop talking about it. And I love Lane Kiffin. I thoroughly enjoy Lane Kiffin and I'm a huge Lane Kiffin stan. But what he's got going in Ole Miss and in Oxford, very impressive so far. Again, a game that Alabama is absolutely on the ropes. And I'm not sure if Ole Miss has played Alabama recently when this has been the situation, because Ole Miss and Alabama normally play early on in the season. They normally play, that 3rd week of September or something like that. So I don't think we've seen a situation like this where you've got number 10 Alabama, number 11 Ole Miss with a better record than Alabama's got, and this late in the season with this many, I say, championship and playoff implications in place. But we already kind of talked about how those are a little bit slimmer than they would be if they had gotten the win over LSU, if Alabama had. So what are you looking for from Alabama specifically come Saturday? Because I've got a list and we can get to it. What are you looking for?
I'm sure you have a list. The one thing that's at the top of my mind is going back to something you said with Lane talking about the dynasty. Now, if there's one thing that Nick Saban-led Crimson Tide teams have been really good at, it's not losing consecutive games.
Mhm.
I mean, they almost never do it. I think the last time it happened was either Saban's first or second year, and it's been quite a long time. Now, normally, if they lose one game, that's the only game they lose.
Right.
This year, a little different. This is not going to be the year that they lose back-to-back games. It's just not going to happen. This is going to be a game where we see Bryce go to another level, in my opinion. Probably going to throw for like 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to just run the ball down their throat. This is a game where Saban knows, look, we have to win, not necessarily because of the implications. We just have to win. This is a game.
We have to win for ourselves and this program. That's what we have to win for.
Right. And has this season to this point been a letdown? You can't say no, because after the national championship, the first thing out of your mouth after you're like, Georgia won was, okay, well, Bryce Young's coming back. Will Anderson's coming back. Those two alone had to give you hope. So going into this game, you already have 2 losses. You cannot lose a third game. I think the focus has to be get the offense clicking and do not let the defense make any mistakes. They have not been perfect on defense, and that's clear. The defense is not what it was last year, but it's still Alabama. There's still a standard they're expected to play to, and losing to Ole Miss is not an option. So there are a couple things they have to do. Bryce has to play like the Heisman winner he was last year. You want to see them really attack in the pass rush. And then hopefully you stay clean on special teams and Will Reichard goes back to Mr. Perfect.
Listen, we stand Will Reichard in this household. We do.
Sure.
The pressure, the stress. I feel for that boy. I don't know if he has lost hair this season because of the intense situations that he has been under. But yes, hopefully he has a great game, as well as the defense, offense, and all of that. I always say, I would never want to be lining up against an Alabama team, specifically a Nick Saban-led Alabama football team that is coming off a loss, that is coming off a 1-point overtime loss to one of your biggest rivals. I don't want to be Jackson Dart. I do not want to see Will Anderson Jr. look at me in the face on the other side of that line of scrimmage when Alabama is coming off a loss. I don't necessarily want to be on the other side of Will Anderson when they're coming off a win either. But the thought of, and I said this, DJ and I talked about this, after the Tennessee game, heading into that Mississippi State game, I feel bad for those Mississippi State football players because you're always going to get a tough game against Alabama, but especially when you're coming off a loss like that and they are coming in hungry and they are coming in again with that no room for error mentality. I don't want to be an Ole Miss Rebel on Saturday, at least on the field. Maybe the fans will have fun and everything like that, but I do not want to be Jackson Dart taking a sack from Henry To'oTo'o come Saturday afternoon because A, it sounds painful, but B, it's definitely not setting you up for the best success rate because Alabama, like you said, they don't do these back-to-back losses. It is not something that is common of them, and it is certainly completely against the Alabama standard that Nick Saban has built with this program and everything like that. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, I hope he has a big game. I think the run game could be very effective in Oxford, and I need Bryce to have that Heisman looking game because we've had the Heisman moments from him this season. His drive at LSU was great, getting in to field goal range at Texas, a Heisman moment, you could say, that is reflective of his season last year. But I think to your point earlier, and DJ and I have talked about kind of the connection that Bryce has with the receivers this year. I don't know if that whole Bryce Young Heisman game is available with where the receivers are at right now. I want to see him throw for however many yards and however many touchdowns, but I don't know if we're going to see that because I don't know. And Ja'Cory Brooks and the guys, they've made some great plays. Of course, Ja'Cory had the touchdown against LSU. We've seen great stuff come from them, but we haven't had too many of those defining receiver moments. It's been Bryce Young, and we've seen Bryce Young do what Bryce Young can do. But I think Jahmyr absolutely could have a great game, and I need the defense. I need the defense to be better. And I have said it all season long, and it's not that I could do a better job because I know that I couldn't. But we saw them come out of Tennessee, and we saw them almost shut out Mississippi State. I don't necessarily know if they could shut out Ole Miss on their home turf because I think Ole Miss is obviously a better team than Mississippi State, but I need them to try. That's for sure. And I need them to, I've been saying it all season long, you can't let up. In the SEC, you cannot give Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels room to breathe. You cannot have them thinking that they're in this game before. It's one of my favorite quotes of the season. And of course, in certain games, it has not panned out. But before the Arkansas game, Will Anderson said, we want to go into these stadiums and have their fans leaving by the third quarter. We do not want these fans and these players and these coaches to think that they have a chance. And that's exactly the mentality that they need to have going into Vaught Hemingway Stadium in Oxford come 2:30 Saturday afternoon, because especially with Lane Kiffin in charge, and especially the kind of offense that Ole Miss runs and the kind of different things that they do over there that maybe Alabama hasn't seen so far this season, you cannot give them that room to think that they're in there. You can't let that stadium get the momentum to think that their team is in that. And so I need the defense to come out hot. I need both. I need the defense to come out hot and shut them down, but I also need, we've seen time and time again, when Alabama scores on their first offensive drive of the game, success for Alabama football. I would love nothing more than for Bryce Young to come out their first drive of the game and launch a 60-yard bomb to Ja'Cory Brooks and then have Jahmyr run it in from 25 out or something like that, just to shut that stadium up early. And to have a moment like that, will that happen? Of course, we don't know. We have to wait and see come Saturday. And neither one of us is on the sidelines coaching. I'll be on the sidelines filming, but we obviously don't have really a hand in the game. But I would love to see all of that happen against Ole Miss and the Lane Train.
Right. And the thing you got to remember, they have been perfect at home, 5-0 at home. Mm-hmm. And the two losses that they have are on the road in hostile environments. And those two losses by a combined 4 points. So it's not like they're getting blown out. They're in every one of these games down to the last second, the very last second. I don't know about you. I don't think of Ole Miss as a hostile environment. Not in the same way that Tennessee and LSU both proved to be.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. I think Ole Miss is, and I have had some nasty run-ins with some Ole Miss fans, I will say that, but I think the stadium environment itself, and I could be proved wrong about this come Saturday when I'm in there, but I absolutely think, especially with the historic rivalry that comes with Tennessee and LSU, like that was that's gonna be a nasty environment. LSU, I mean, the Crazy Cajuns, they're nasty to anyone that comes in their stadium. Right. So I agree with you. I think it's gonna be a hostile environment, but I think they've already played in ones that are significantly more so earlier this season.
Right. I'm not saying that the Rebels and Rebel fans do not bring the energy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not the same as what LSU and Tennessee did this year. Now, of course, it's going to be packed. It's going to be loud. They're going to want to beat the crap out of Alabama, as any team that plays Alabama does. But I think having those two games under their belt already, the team knows what's coming. And I don't think it's going to be at the same level of those other two games. I don't even see this one potentially going to overtime. So I think that this game, it's going to be a different game. It's going to be a different environment. I don't see how they lose this game unless something goes completely sideways.
Yeah.
Like, if you need to have Jalen Milroe at quarterback, again, different situation.
Mm-hmm.
But if Bryce is playing, I don't think so.
So a score prediction for clearly Alabama winning, because clearly you don't see them losing this game. So let's hear it.
Yes.
What do you got for
If I had to give you a score prediction,
me? Mm-hmm.
you know, let me preface this by saying
Okay.
I'm not good at math. So if this number doesn't
Me
seem to make
both,
sense
sister.
to you,
You and me both.
I want to say 35-24.
I was going
Alabama.
to say 36-28 Alabama.
Okay. How'd you get 36?
I don't know.
See, we should have paid
it,
more attention in math class. I'm saying 35-24.
Fine.
I don't know how they're going to get those points, but that's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm going.
But mark it down.
Mark it down. 35-24 from Max
Alabama.
Cohan.
Yeah. Alabama takes this one 35-24. And if they don't, guess what? I don't work in Las Vegas. Do not blame me. Don't take my odds. Saying,
do not trust anything that is going on this call. Well, because they're favored by 12, 11 and a half, 12.
I don't even know what the line is. That's how out of the.
Do you pay attention at all?
Sometimes I try. But
I think they're favored by 11 and a half or 12, which they're favored by 11 and a half or 12, which is not surprising to me, but they have like a 75% chance of winning. And that was a little surprising to me.
The line is 12. So it's
look at that.
A 12-point favor for Alabama, but let's see what the ESPN projection is.
I'm almost positive it's 75% Alabama.
75.3. So,
which I think is like, I was a little surprised by that. I don't like, I obviously I don't know exactly all what goes into that, but like I was a little surprised. Like, okay, like coming off a loss, but then as we already talked about, Alabama coming off a loss typically proves favorable. But with it being such a 10-11 matchup, Ole Miss with a better record, like I'm not shocked. The line is not shocking to me, but the percentage to win was a little high, I feel like. But I mean, you are 100% on Alabama, so
yeah, I just I don't see a way that they lose this game because they just can't. They just not. It's not part of the fabric.
Not allowed
to lose this game. So, I mean, there would have to be something that goes crazy wrong for them to lose this game. And I just don't see that happening.
Well, I will hold you to that. And you could be getting a happy phone call from me from Oxford Saturday night, or I could be angry. I'm hoping it's happy. I think it'll be happy. I think Alabama wins as well. Just everything we've talked about. I think there is no room for another loss. These guys, to put it frankly, they're pissed off. They are not happy with the way that this season has gone because obviously, as soon as you lose that national championship at Alabama and several other universities, that have turned into these dominant football programs, once you lose a national championship, the first thing that's on your mind is winning the next one that next year. It's not a fluke that Alabama was in the national championship. Same, Georgia as well. I'm sure if Georgia had lost that game, they're thinking, well, we want to be there next year and that kind of stuff. So they are pissed off. They are not happy with how the season is going. And I think a loss to Ole Miss is just not in any of their futures. It is not what any of them want to see happen, expect to see happen, or need to see happen on Saturday. So, of course, Max and I, we were both saying Alabama is rolling to a victory against Ole Miss. I like that. I do like that a lot. So thank you so much for joining me, Max. It was so much fun chatting with you.
Yeah, I just want you to know I got off of a very heated game of Call of Duty just to join you on this. So just to show you where my priorities were.
I am so honored that you did that. I am so happy. If Alabama loses on Saturday, which they will not, I am speaking that into existence. But if they do, I will never have you on this show ever again.
I can't believe I'm here right now. So that would be quite all right if I don't.
And I say, You were just such a reliable person for me to contact to talk about Alabama football, and you did it so well. So thank you, of course, for joining me on this. Everyone getting ready for game day, Alabama versus Ole Miss, a 2:30 kick on CBS. And let's hope it does not go into overtime. Let's hope we just have a nice, easy game. I can get my first half highlights done during halftime and not have to sweat throughout the second half. That's what I am hoping for. So a 2:30 kick against Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi on Saturday. Let's hope the Alabama Crimson Tide rolls to a victory. And Max, the Syracuse grad, can we get a roll tide from Max Cohan?
I don't know if I can muster that. I don't know if I have what it takes.
Show. I'll say
you-
go Orange.
Will you?
My Apple Watch is giving me your phone number because I said your name.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Apple knows
I
too
just
much
said
about
go
it.
Orange.
All
Because
right,
y'all
I'll
aren't
say-
making it into the
I'll say
playoffs
it
either.
one time. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Thank you, Max. And roll Tide.